Now it is my pleasure to welcome Mary Snapp to the stage. Mary Snapp joined Microsoft in 1988 as the company's very first female attorney. She is now the corporate vice president at Microsoft and leads Microsoft Philanthropies. This is the team that is responsible for all of the company's philanthropic efforts. The team seeks to invest the company's strongest assets, technology, money, employee talent, and the company's voice to partner with nonprofit and communities to create lasting positive impact. Please welcome Mary to the stage.
Hi, everybody. It's so great to see all of you here this afternoon, and it was just such a pleasure to hear the speakers ahead of me. I guess it was a pleasure and it was not a pleasure because some of the things that they talked about were some of the same things that I talked about when I was starting in a career, 30, 35 years ago. But I'm glad to see that we're all still smiling, we're still persevering, we're moving forward. So let me tell you just a little bit about some of the work that I do and why I do it, because I think what I really want to talk more about is finding purpose in your work life and really enjoying what you want to do. So when I think about the things I do, yes, I lead a team of about 100 people, and yes, I manage the budget, and yes, I get to travel, and I think big strategery things. But the most important part, the best part, are when I get to do things like this. Visiting, in this case, a cancer hospital in Vancouver, British Columbia, and having this young man talk to me about Microsoft products and actually giving us product design feedback. He was very good at it. He was very, very good at it. And it was just a pleasure to spend time with him. Or this picture is a little bit different. This picture really relates to a different part of my job, and that's the part where it is building partnerships and doing advocacy with other nonprofit organizations and large multinational NGOs like the World Bank or UNICEF or the World Food Program. This was a picture taken in Davos, notable for me in that it was about 5 degrees that morning, and I'd already walked about 2 miles in my muddy boots and was still persevering in terms of going on to meet with other people during the day to talk about planning for the year. The job really involves lots of different things. It involves, in some cases, working at the state level and the federal level on workforce development, like this picture here taken at the governor's mansion. Do any of you recognize who this is? Oh my gosh, that's because he's only the 14th person to declare that he's running for president, so we don't know who he is. Okay, this is Governor Hickenlooper from Colorado, who is now officially running for president as well. Introducing him at a workforce development opportunity. Talking with young people. These young people actually started their own company, and they do internet support work and services work. All of them have a mobility issue of some kind, and yet they do this work quite well. They're a vendor of Microsoft's in Malaysia. The next picture is at a refugee camp in Jordan, where I really had the privilege to go a couple of years ago with UNHCR to see how people were living in the camps. And boy, talk about grit and talk about persistence. The people here were just amazing in terms of the hope that they brought to what they do every day. These young girls were going to school in the camp. They had arranged for a bus to take them across the camp. This particular camp was about, I think it was about 35,000 people. And the kids came out every day, and the camp had a hospital. It had schools. About 40 babies were born in the camp every year. You might know that the average stay of someone who's in a refugee camp like this is about 17 years. So when you see a little one like this, you know how important it is to think about education and digital skills and training in the camps, ensuring that people really have the education and the skills that they need. So this was a particularly rewarding opportunity for me. And then the last picture is at the United Nations. You might notice that I'm the only woman on the panel. It's usually the case still that I am the only woman on the panel at these kinds of things, even after all of this time. And so it's important to actually, as Ebony told us, to seize the moment and to just go for it. So let me tell you a little bit about the work that Microsoft does and how I fit into that. This is the mission of the company that Satya Nadella, our CEO, helped us to reshape and reform when he became CEO 4 years ago. And from my perspective, the only way that we can empower every person and organization on the planet is actually to reach everybody. And so that's the role that my team and I play, to ensure that everybody has the opportunity to have access to education and have access to learning and to technology. So in the work that we do, we actually have several areas of focus. I'm just going to pull them all up here. Learning and the future of work. I spend most of my time talking about the importance of skills for the 21st century. I talk a lot about computer science and about how important computer science is for those skills. Did you know that 90% of girls, if you ask them, say that they're creative? But then when you ask them if they think computer science is creative, only 10% think that computer science is creative. But at the same time, we know that computer science is creative, that it teaches communication skills, it teaches collaboration skills, teaches you how to be a critical thinker. When I first started at Microsoft, I was really interested in some of the first speakers in the room who talked about being the only woman and a woman of color. That was not, the latter was not my experience, but as a lawyer, I was often the only woman and the only lawyer in the room. It was not a good combination typically for making friends, in some of these environments, because all of my clients were engineers at that time. All of them were engineers. And I thought I would have nothing in common with them, that I wouldn't know how to talk to them, that I wouldn't understand them. And it turns out after about 5 years, I realized that I got them. And it's because the way that I was taught to think in law school, how to analyze a problem, was not that different than the way a computer scientist thinks about analyzing a problem. Now, I waited till I was 30 to finish law school, but getting computer science early on in middle school and grade school is really important for developing these kinds of skills, because we all know that we're going to need to be lifelong learners as we go forward in our life. And we need to ensure that every 6 or 7 years, you might be open to doing something different and learning a new skill for a job or a role, but those immediate kinds of adaptive skills that you might have learned in computer science or any other law school, for example, will really suit you well as you go forward. We also think in terms of our work about how we can make nonprofits better at what they do. So we have long-term partnerships with many nonprofits, some of them going back 20 years, such as Boys and Girls Club. Others are only 3 months old, like our partnership with Black Girls Code, who's opening a chapter in the Seattle area next. But we think about this as the ability to provide cash, also to provide software and technology, and most importantly, being able to help nonprofits know how to deploy and implement, as opposed to just providing a software and a cash grant. We really want to think that we are true partners. And in partnerships, in order to get a good partner, you have to be a good partner. So we really focus on what that partnership looks like. And then the last piece is employee engagement. At Microsoft, we started with doing philanthropy with employee engagement. Bill Gates, long ago, his mother convinced him that he needed to support the local United Way campaign, and that was really built on employees. We started that about 30 years ago, 1983 or so. Last year, about 75% of employees in the United States participated in some way. They raised over $60 million for 19,000 nonprofits around the world, and Microsoft matched that amount. So it was over $125 million to 19,000 nonprofits. It's really become, I think, an important way for our employees also to think that they have purpose and that they really can decide where they want to invest. So those are the areas of focus. In terms of communities of focus, just to briefly talk a little bit about this, we have often started with partnerships at the very high level, but about 2 years ago, we looked at the results, frankly, of the 2016 election, and I took a look at the nonprofits with whom we were investing, and I realized that almost all of their offices were on the West Coast or the East Coast. and very little in the middle of the country. So we then decided that we would try something a little bit different. We would start involving ourselves with some nonprofits who worked across the middle. And so finding unlikely partners, we now have partnerships with the National 4-H Council, which really works across rural, and with FFA, which was formerly Future Farmers of America, which also works across rural, and are working with them to update their youth development programs so that they use technology as part of the work that they do in each of their clubs. But we also started with civic engagement. We decided we would go to a city, for example, where we had data centers. And those of you, I know you probably know this, data centers, just like big, black, dark buildings, no windows. They take a lot of water. They emit a lot of heat. They have a carbon footprint issue. But they don't employ many employees in a town. So we really knew it was important to be involved civically in some of these places where we had data centers, and frankly, we picked some other small towns or cities, small cities around the United States, in which we would hire somebody locally from the community to be a full-time Microsoft employee and help to bring our assets into that community. So still a work in progress for that. The humanitarian action is very important to us. When I started in this job 4 years ago, we only responded to natural disasters, so earthquakes or floods. We changed the charter because we were in the midst of and still are in the midst of the largest number of displaced people since World War II. About 75 million people have been displaced, many of them in their home countries, but many not. So we first started with technology to ensure that as people were on migration paths, they would have the benefit of Wi-Fi access to get services and help. And now we are much more talking about things like education, either in refugee camps or in host communities, because we know that that will be important. In Washington State, we do a lot of work in the arts and human services in addition to the education space. And we know that that's important in order for that community in Seattle to be vital for the 45,000 or so employees who are right in the area. And then finally, I've talked a little bit about some of the rural work we've done and will continue to do as we go forward. This is really incremental and added on to the work that we've already done. It's a job that I love. I love feeling as though the company I work for supports this. I love having the opportunity to participate in it myself. I love having the opportunity to learn alongside with others. I frankly am so glad not to be a lawyer anymore. I mean, I would go to these meetings and I would say, oh my gosh, nobody said the word indemnification. You know, which you all probably don't even know what it is, and I'm glad that I don't really have to anymore, because I really get to do things and learn about things that I never thought I would in areas of education and health and humanitarian and other things like that. So what I wanted to really then sort of leave you with was that, you know, things take a while to mature, and you gotta like just keep going. So this is one of my first speeches. I think I was 17 years old, you know. I found this picture the other day, and I was laughing at the guy with the cigar, you know, in his mouth. I'm like, oh my God. I was in a contest. I was actually in a contest for my local high school. Actually, it was a statewide contest. At the time, I knew, honestly, I had no chance of winning because, of course, a boy won, and I was the only girl competing in this contest, but it was important for me to do, and my parents were very proud, and I looked forward to using my skills in my next job, which is this is my, I know you guys are laughing. You're laughing. Okay, this was my next job. I worked for General Motors when I finished college, and I did a program called Previews of Progress, where I went on the road with 2,000 pounds of equipment in a van for 4 months at a time, and twice a day gave a speech to a junior high or a high school about the wonders of science. So you can see here, you know, there's a moon rover thingy with solar. And there's a laser beam, that was really cool. There was a turbine engine. So in some ways now when I talk about education and computer science from this first job, it all you know, kind of is a full circle for me. I was also the first woman that was ever hired on this job. They were so afraid of having a woman travel with a man. unmarried couple. I mean, it was just, they were horrified at what could happen. So I was glad that I kept it solid for them. They hired many more women after me. That was not an issue. But, you know, those are the times, you know, that we were in. As Arkna said, when I went to Microsoft, I was the first woman lawyer at Microsoft and spent lots of, like the first couple of years were kind of lonely. Until I figured out that I really thought a lot like those geeks, and I had a lot more in common with them than I thought. And then to one of the more recent pictures at a recent convention where I actually didn't feel lonely here. I just finished giving this speech, and everyone applauded. A few people even stood, and it was just great. So what I want to tell you is that after some number of years of being lonely and working in various careers and changing jobs, you really don't have to be lonely. And you won't be lonely because you're all gonna help each other. So thank you very much. It's just been a pleasure to talk with you today.